Okay. I guess we are live. Okay. All right. So this is the first episode of the Cookie Button Show, and in the first episode, I've had the pleasure of welcoming Mr. Simon Benetts from OWASP ZAP, which is one of the world's very famous open source web securities tool. So without further ado, let me add Simon to the stream and then let the discussion going. All right, Simon. Yes, we can see you. All right. So, Simon, so let's get started. How are you doing? I'm doing great. Thank you. Thank you for asking. All right. So, I just needed to check a little bit if the stream is on or not. Okay. Just a second. Okay. Yes, you're perfectly fine. So,
Yay.
Simon, I would like you to tell a little bit about your background, about who you are, and how you became involved with, web security and OWASP ZAP.
Sure. So I was a developer, a software developer. I worked for a FTSE 100 company in 2009, and I was leading a small team. We were developing online services, and we knew they needed to be secure. Uh, my background is really developing back-end systems, so I hadn't got involved in the front end very much. But there wasn't really a GUI, there was just an API. We had an admin console, which was all internal. So we learned a bit about security, thought we knew enough. And I made sure we got the pen testers in a couple of weeks before we went live, just to prove we'd done everything right, tick the boxes, give us that sense of confidence. So got a couple of pen testers in, explained everything about the system. I knew they were on our side. We wanted them to have the full access to everything. Set them up in a room, went in back in an hour after, just to check they're okay. Could I help them with anything? And as I mentioned to you before, one of them was logged into the admin console with my credentials, which they shouldn't have had. And it wasn't actually my service they'd cracked the single sign-on system for the entire company, which was a bit of a shock. Technically, that was out of scope, but we were really pleased they found that. And yeah, the rest of the week went downhill from there, really. They found a whole lot of problems, including things I've never heard of, things like cross-site request forgery. Didn't know what that was. I was, they explained it to me. I said, well, it's okay because, this admin console is behind a firewall. And the guy's going, nope, I can show you how we can attack it from outside. It's like, yeah, it was a shock. So I realized that, I could develop services that performed, they could scale, they were reliable, they were usable, they weren't secure enough. So I wanted to learn about security. And at the time, I really just wanted to learn about security to make me a better developer. I wanted to make sure that my services were robust in all senses. So I learned heard about OWASP, which I hadn't heard of before. And there's the OWASP Top 10, which is the top 10 most serious risks to application security. So I learned about those. But I'm a developer. I like playing with things. I don't like reading about stuff. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do this properly. I'm going to find an open source tool which I can use to test my software every night, so I don't get embarrassed in front of the pen testers again. Something that I can help me learn a bit more about security, because I was interested in it now, and maybe contribute back to it. I was kind of thinking it'd be good to get involved in open source at that stage. And I couldn't find anything. There was nothing out there that was maintained, which I just felt was wrong. It didn't seem right. There was no maintained open source web security tools at the time. And I didn't like that. I thought, there needs to be something. But there were some older tools. There's Web Scarab from OWASP, which I didn't really get along with, and a tool called Paros Proxy, which is a bit simpler, but I quite liked. I could see how it worked, or at the superficial level. So I played around with it, liked it, and yeah, started using that myself. But I started to give talks to other people where I was working, developers and QA functional testers, because I thought, you only really know whether you understand something. Either you program it or you explain it to someone else, and I was trying to do both. So I started giving talks about the OWASP top 10, and every time, first question, what tools should we use? Okay, so after a few of these sessions, I thought I'll go away, have a look, see what I can recommend. And things hadn't changed. It was still just the same. There's nothing out there was maintained. Although there was something was maintained now, because I was hacking around with this version of Paros Proxy. There were a few things I didn't like, so I kind of tweaked things. And I realized that was then something that was maintained. I hadn't released it, but it was being maintained. So I decided to bite the bullet and release it. And I released it as Zap. And that was the start, really. I think you're muted.
Yes. No, actually, I think that was a very insightful beginning, and that inspiration to begin was really needed to get started, because you kind of started by understanding what lacked in the market or what you can actually, add to, right?
Yeah,
So
I
moving
feel
on
need
to
for it. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So I would just want you to break down OWASP ZAP into layman terms, so that contributors who are looking forward to contribute to web security tools which are open source in nature can get a clear understanding of what is ZAP and why should we contribute. And also one more thing, how does it differ from the other web application security tools in the market?
Ooh, lots to talk about there then. So yeah, Zap is a tool for finding vulnerabilities in web applications, and it's not really looking for known vulnerabilities. So there are tools which scan for we call CVEs, known published vulnerabilities. So you're using WordPress, using this plugin for this version of WordPress, and there's a known vulnerability. Certain scanners will look for those and tell you. Zap doesn't really do that. It does it in a few cases, but generally we're scanning applications that no one's seen before, potentially. So there's no known vulnerabilities, but that doesn't mean it's secure. So Zap is acting as the evil attacker. It's using the same techniques that malicious attackers will use against your website. It's trying to injection attacks. We're not trying to damage anything, but we are trying to stress it in as many ways as possible. And Zap you can use it in multiple ways. So it's aimed at a whole range of people. So we know that some people, it's good for people who are new to security, whether it's developers or students or functional testers, right all the way to, we have hardcore pen testers use it as well. And we have people who use it manually or automated. And there are companies using it to scan thousands of applications. So it's actually quite a big project now. We've got, I can't remember the repos, like 37 repos or something like that. But it's a relatively small team. But if you want to get involved, and one thing, Zap is a community project. It's always meant to be a community project. When I was looking for, originally I was looking for a security tool, an open source security tool I could get involved in. And when I couldn't find it, I thought, okay, I will try and create that community-based tool. And there's always loads to do. And that's why we want people to get involved, and we need people to get involved. Otherwise, we can't keep up with the commercial tools because they've got lots of money and lots of people to throw at things. We haven't. We've got a few people, and you can make a big difference quite quickly. So there's so much to do, and there's obviously the coding, but there's things like documentation, there's training, there's testing Zap against applications with known vulnerabilities. There's a million things you can do. On the coding side, we have what we call good first issues, where they should be quite simple to get involved in. But then we have a scale of, we've got ones which are a bit harder, and then we've got really hard ones. So one thing we've had is we've had a lot of students work on Zap, and we mentor them either through projects like Google Summer of Code, But we also mentor students directly, and we've got a student hall of fame on the website. So we know that students can make great contributions, and some of the key features of ZAP have been implemented by students. So if you're a student or somebody who's able to spend a bit more time on ZAP, we can find some really juicy things for you to get your teeth stuck into. And the thing is, you don't need to be a security expert to get involved in ZAP. I wasn't. I was a developer. And you also don't need to be a developer. If you know a bit about security, you can learn about development by working on ZAP. So one of the core team, Rick, was a security guy, and he's now learning about development by working on ZAP. So you can go both ways. It helps to have some understanding of technology to start getting involved, but just checking our documentation, helping improve those things, liking the repos, translating. One thing that most security tools are only available in English or American English, and that feels wrong to me. I've never liked that either. So very early on, we internationalized ZAP, and it's being translated into 30 odd languages. So translating into different languages is really great as well. There's just loads of things you can do. So if you're interested, if you want to get involved, then we'll be able to find something for you to work on.
Awesome. I think awesome. And I think one thing that particularly struck me was the Google Summer of Code, because I think one of the recent news, Simon, you must be knowing that Google actually stopped the operations of all the competitive programming contests because it wants to focus more on the open source programs like GSOC and GSOD. So,
Yeah,
of course, I think ZAP is like a great place to work in if ZAP decides to send applications for GSOC this year or the upcoming year as well.
definitely.
I think it was an amazing answer from your end for students who need clarification of how to get started with, security projects, because mostly students are spending time in web development projects, if you may.
Yeah.
Uh, because those are mostly available to students, they understand it pretty clearly.
Yeah.
So moving on to my third question, I want to know what are some of the key features and capabilities of OWASP ZAP, and how do they help organizations improve the web security posture?
Another big question. So yeah, ZAP is all about doing security testing on web applications. Now, I said you can use ZAP either manually or automated. If you're using it manually, you typically proxy your browser through ZAP and you explore the application. And then ZAP basically shows you all the requests and responses, and has a whole set of tools to help you do more security testing. And in many cases, you're doing a lot of manual testing, and in that case, it really helps to have some security knowledge so you know what you're doing. Because when it comes down to it, security testing is not intuitive. It's almost counterintuitive. You're always doing weird things. Some people say that ZAP is hard to understand, and it is, because we try and make it easier, but it is always you're doing strange things. We're talking about edge cases all the time. There's 95% edge cases and 5% normal stuff when it comes to security testing, and that's not just ZAP, it's any security tools. We're always doing weird stuff. That's the whole idea. But the other thing is automation, and this is one of ZAP's strengths, because it's something we've kind of focused on quite a bit, and we know ZAP is used a lot in automation. And it's kind of different because then you don't need to know as much about security, you just need to know how to configure ZAP. But ZAP has to do a lot more, because one of the key things is, how does ZAP know what to test? Well, it has to explore your application. So exploring application is key. If it can't explore your application, it can't find anything to test. And then how do you do that? Well, there's different ways. I mean, obviously, if you're doing manual testing, you can control your browser and you explore the application. But if you're automating it, you can't do that. So we have a couple of spiders. We have a traditional spider, which makes requests, gets the responses back and looks for links and follows it. It's a very standard crawler. This works well. It's very fast, works well for traditional applications. It doesn't work so well for modern apps. And that's because they're so heavily based on JavaScript. And basically, the traditional spider doesn't understand JavaScript, so it won't load the libraries. It won't add all of these web components and stuff. So instead, we have what we call the Ajax spider, and that uses browsers. So we're using a third-party open source tool product called Crawljax, and that uses Selenium. So this will launch browsers and control those browsers, and then it'll click on things, fill out forms and all those things. So those are two key ways of exploring applications, but we can also import API definitions. So we've got API definitions in OpenAPI, Swagger, GraphQL, SOAP, all of the, we can import har logs or whatever. Lots of different options for importing definitions. And yeah, so these are the, and you can also proxy unit tests as well. If you've got tests, you can proxy those through Zap. So there's loads of different pieces of functionality within Zap just for exploring your application. And this is before we've even got to the stage of actually testing anything. So, we have to explore the application, and there's a lot of Zap functionality around that. Then another problem is authentication, because if you've got an application doing something interesting, it's probably protected by a login page. Now that might sound simple to deal with, but it's not, because there's so many different ways of handling authentication, so many different schemes. I think we had a student look at it and he found 35 different ways of authenticating, radically different ways of authenticating. And you get all sorts of pop-ups, and say I'm just having a problem with this on on the Zap user group. Someone saying that they can only log into their web application using Google authentication. Well, that's a pain, because with a lot of single sign-on systems, we can launch a browser, fill in the form and submit it. But Google actually blocks browsers that are being controlled by software. So we can't even do that. So, if you only support Google as a way of authenticating, you probably can't use Zap. And it's not just Zap, you can't use any security tools so if you haven't got a way of getting authentication token, you're stuffed, and this is one of the key things that people need to understand, that it's important to make sure that your applications are testable, because if you can't use tools like Zap, then you won't be able to test them as you go along. You have to wait until you can afford to do a pen test, if you ever can. So bizarrely, sometimes using single sign-on can make your applications less secure, which sounds counterintuitive, but welcome to the world of security.
Absolutely. What are some of the most common web application security vulnerabilities that OWASP ZAP can help detect and mitigate?
So we don't do much testing of authentication. So for us, authentication is just trying to get access to the application. When it comes to testing authentication, that's best left to the experts, left to someone doing manual testing, because there's so many things that can go wrong, and it's often so subtle. So with authentication, generally with Zap, we're just trying to get logged in so we can access the application and access the functionality. And then we're looking for, there's a whole load of injection type vulnerabilities, so cross-site scripting, SQL injection, there's a whole range of things. And Zap searches, there's hundreds of vulnerabilities that Zap will try and detect, all of which we list. So we've got a website, zedaproxy.org, and all of the alerts are on there, so you can delve into them and see the descriptions. And actually, they link to the code as well. We're open source, so of course we link to everything. So if you want to delve down to the code and see how it all works, then it's all visible.
Right. So coming to this particular question of mine, like, how does OWASP ZAP, integrate with other security tools and processes such as, DevOps and CI/CD pipelines?
So Zap it's what we call Dynamic Application Security Testing Tool, so DAST for short. And the important thing is there's no one tool or one type of tool that will do everything for you. So security tools look at things in different ways. So we have static source code analysis, sometimes called software application security testing, or SAST, and that's where you look at the source code. So you'll point that at your source code, and then those SAST scanners will be able to find certain problems. But they often report lots and lots of problems, some of which may not be exploitable. Whereas with Zap, we're actually attacking the application from the outside, so we will find things that really can be exploited. So, and then you have things like software composition analysis, SCA, so you're looking at the dependencies. these tools are all looking at things from very different directions. So in some ways, the security tools don't integrate very well. And this is an industry problem. And this is something we need to change. And I'm trying to talk to some of the other industry vendors and other open source projects to see how we can work better together, because we do need to actually provide a better view of the application as a whole. But as I said, scanners like ZAP, DAS scanners can take quite a long time. If you've got a big application, running a full ZAP scan could take hours. So this doesn't work well with DevSecOps or DevOps, where you want to test things very quickly. But ZAP is actually very flexible. So what you can do is you can sort of restrict what ZAP does. So I used to work at Mozilla. One of the things we did there was we created what we call a baseline scan, and ZAP will then try and crawl the application either using the traditional spider or the Ajax spider and limit it to 1 minute, 1 minute of crawling. And then we just did passive scanning. So if ZAP makes any requests or you proxy any requests through ZAP, ZAP will see the requests and the responses and it will passively scan them. So this is not attacking the application, but it's looking for things like missing security headers or missing controls on cookies. There's a whole lot of interesting things that ZAP can find. And that kind of scan will be over in a couple of minutes. So that is something you can do on pull requests. So you can actually, or you can decide to go, okay, we're just going to look for cross-site scripting, something like that. Or if you've got good integration with other tools, so things like SaaS tools, if they can kind of map from code to endpoints, then what you can do on a pull request, if you've got a pull request with, say, 3 files have changed, if you can actually work out what endpoints have changed as a result of that, then you can tell ZAP to actually just attack those 3 endpoints, and ZAP will be much quicker than you attacking 100. So, but that's outside of ZAP's scope. ZAP doesn't understand what source code is. It doesn't know, it hasn't got that mapping. So that's why you need a SaaS type tool or something that understands the routing to configure ZAP. If you can do that, then you can make things a lot better. So you can do very effective attacking on pull requests. But if you want to do the full scan, then I'd definitely recommend doing it in a scheduled way. That could be overnight or every weekend. So, and that's where ZAP will do very effective testing, which, as I said, can take half an hour, several hours. But at least you'll have a good chance of finding all the common vulnerabilities that way.
Hi, Simon, can you hear me? I think we lost you there for a minute.
I could, yeah, I lost you, but I appeared to be on stage still, but you didn't, so.
Hi, Simon, I think we lost you there. Hello.
Hello, yeah, yeah.
Hi, Simon, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. You keep on dropping in and out. It says I'm still on stage, but whether that's true or not, I don't know. But
I think we are having
and now speaker offline.
Yeah, I think we are having some connection problems here.
I'm back.
Oh, all right, great. Sorry, we lost you there for a minute.
Back again.
Yes, please continue. Please continue.
Right. I've now forgotten what we're talking about. So, and I don't know at what point you lost me. So, we were talking about how applications can use, companies can use ZAP. So,
Yeah.
if you can, you can tie ZAP down to just do passive scanning. So you can do those on PRs. You could just focus on, say, cross-site scripting. Or if your SaaS tool can map between the files have changed and endpoints, you could constrain ZAP to do very intense testing just on a couple of URLs. So in that case, you can do it in a DevOps environment. Otherwise, scheduled scans are great. If you want to test the whole application, then you can schedule that overnight, over the weekend, and then ZAP will do a lot of some very thorough testing and it'll pick up all those common vulnerabilities. Still muted, I think.
Nope. Yes, I was just listening to you and just taking some notes. So yeah, so that also, constantly, bringing me to different other questions, some subcategory questions which I shall be asking you. So, how does the OWASP ZAP community ensure the quality and security of the code base? And what is the contribution process like? If you could just walk us through.
Sure. So what we do is we have a core team who maintains Zap, and there's four of us at the moment, and we've got an extended team as well. And the idea is any pull request that gets submitted to Zap, wherever possible, it should have full set of unit tests, which a few years ago we didn't have any unit tests, but we're now working hard on improving that and all changes. Some of the desktop things are harder to test, but in general, we want full unit tests there. And every change must be checked and approved by two of the core team. Even, I mean, if I make changes, all my stuff has to be checked by two of the core team and approved as well. And it's very rare I actually get anything through the first time without any recommendations. So we're very careful about making sure that everything is going to work properly and has full unit tests. Every night we run a set of tests where we're testing Zap against applications with known vulnerabilities, and we publish these as well, so you can see exactly how well Zap is doing. And so if you want to get involved, you want to get involved in the coding side, then we've got a set of good first issues. So you can just comment on one of those which hasn't been allocated to anyone and said, I'd like to work on it. We'll assign it to you. Generally, the good first issues, they should explain where the code is, probably only affect one file, and they should have a decent description. But if it's not clear, you can ask, and we're only to help with that. And so you then make the changes which fix the problem or add a feature or whatever, add the unit tests, submit a pull request. At that point, we'll then review it and make some suggestions. But once all that's all good, then that will be merged. And we'll add your name to the set of Zap contributors, because once you get one pull request in, that's it, you're in. But then there's so many more things, and you can decide to work on different issues, or if there's a particular area you want to focus on. If you want to work on a project, we can talk about that. So I'm very happy to jump on a video call with someone. If you want to spend some time on Zap, we can talk about it. How would it be? What are you looking for? What would you like to work on? And if you've got your own idea, great. If you haven't, we can talk about things, because there's always things that's going on, and the ideas we've had, we just haven't had a chance to write down or create issues for. And then, just get involved. And anyone who contributes for any length of time will get into the extended team and then into the core team. It's all about contributions and how much you've been able to help us.
Awesome, awesome. I think people who are listening right now, they should definitely check OWASP ZAP out on their GitHub repository and definitely on their website as well. I have already shared all the links in the description of the Twitter link, of the website, and the GitHub
Great.
repository link. And since you can very well understand that you have such an amazing leader like Simon who can actually guide you through so many things, no, no, you really deserve that because of such an inclusive community you have built around Zap also. And leadership is more about getting people on board with you and understanding the primary mission of the project behind. So I truly respect you, Simon, based on that. So let's talk about some of the challenges that organizations face when trying to secure their web applications, and how can OWASP ZAP help address them?
One of the problems is developers don't know a lot about security. A lot of developers have not had much security training. And when it comes down to it, a lot of web security is really hard. It's really obscure stuff. So I think things are generally getting a bit better. I think a few people, some developers have a bit more training, not enough, but you never have enough. And some of the frameworks that they're using have better secure defaults. So using good frameworks, have good secure defaults is a great place to start. And I think more organizations are doing that. But if even so, you can still, even if you use the right frameworks and you think you're taking care of things, you may still have a whole load of security vulnerabilities. So you have to test them. Now, the best way to test something is to get in the professional pen testers, a manual test. But these things take time and they're expensive. If you're working on something that's really security critical, your company should pay for that. But even if they do, you don't just want to bring the pen testers in first, because if you do that, they'll find a load of trivial things, and they won't find the really interesting things. When I was working at Mozilla, we had a graded approach where we would do automated testing with tools like Zap overnight or on pull requests. We would then do internal testing manually as well, but then we would get pen testers in. And so I was on the web services security team, and we had dozens of different services. So we would only be able to do, say, 2 pen tests a year on 2 different services. But generally, we found we got great value, because after a couple of days, the pen testers were starting to sweat because they hadn't found anything interesting. Because we were doing a lot of it, we had good developers who understood security. We were doing automated tests. We were doing manual tests. But we couldn't spend as much time as a dedicated pen test team could. But even then, they would find it took them a while to find really interesting vulnerabilities. So having that background and making sure that we actually were doing the basics meant we got real value out of pen tests. So you should definitely start using tools like Zap as early as possible, as soon as you start developing applications, and way before you get the security professionals in, because you want to get value out of them. If you're going to spend it's going to cost you a lot of money to get them in, if you're able to do that. So make sure you found the easy stuff first, the most common vulnerabilities, and then get them in to find the really hard stuff. And I may still be online, but it looks like our speaker Barsha is not online at the moment. I don't know if anyone can hear me, whether I am actually online, but if I am, then sorry about the technical problems. If you are interested in getting involved in Zap, then have a look at Zed Attack.
Wait.
Aha, I'm back.
You're back. All right. So we lost you for a minute, so I was just speaking a little bit about OWASP ZAP to the listeners who might be listening. So to just come down to this particular question, which is how does OWASP ZAP support any compliance standards or regulations such as the PCI DSS or the GDPR?
So I don't tend to get involved with those as much. I have heard that some people have used Zap as the basis of getting through some of the PCI tests. It won't do everything for you, but there's definitely, you can use the fact that you're using Zap to get through to answer some of those questions. But that's definitely not my area of expertise. So yeah, you'll have to get with somebody else about the details for that, I'm afraid.
All right, that's okay. Because I mean, as you mentioned, that it's a core team, and so people are mostly active, doing their work. So if not Simon, there are many people other in the GitHub repository team section, which you can reach out to them and ask them the questions if you want. So can you share any success stories or examples of organizations that have implemented Zap and seen significant improvements in their web security?
So one thing we find is people don't tell us how things are going. We find we don't know what's going on. We don't know, how people are using Zap. We get very little feedback. I did actually hear when I went to OWASP AppSec California last year, I was talking to someone who's on the OWASP board, and they're explaining to me that they worked for a very big bank in the States, and that bank had a set of applications that they were trying to scan, and they tried every commercial scanner out there, and none of them could cope with their application. None of them could actually even start to scan their application. But Zap was able to, because not out of the box, but Zap is very, very flexible. And we have a scripting interface which basically means you can kind of reprogram Zap on the fly. And they knew about this, and they were able to go in, create some scripts, which meant Zap was able to log into their application and start scanning it. And none of the commercial scanners could do that. So we hear of a few odd snippets like this, but in general, customers don't tell us what they're doing. They don't have to. We do have some success stories on zaproxy.org. So zaproxy.org, I think it's community, and then if you scroll down, there's success stories somewhere there as well. We got a lot of information on there, so that's usually the first place to look for anything to find out anything more about Zap.
Right. Since you mentioned about the different features of authentication that Zap involves itself with. So moving ahead, I would want to know how do you see the web application security landscape evolving in the next few years, and how is Zap adapting to those changes?
We've seen a big change in the last few years with how applications are created and how the different ways, the different technologies they use. We used to have what we call traditional web applications, where you had a fairly simple front end, and making a request to the back end, you get the whole pages back. That's, modern web apps don't do that, although and I may have gone offline now or may not, so I'll carry on talking. So we found that is very different. And I think a lot of scanners still find it difficult to make the most of and explore web applications really effectively. Zap is doing fairly well, but we could definitely do more of that. So I think there's going to be people are going to carry on using all the latest features and browsers, and we need to handle that, and we need to make sure that Zap is as effective as possible. And that's one of the things we are working
Once
on.
again. All right, yeah.
And back again.
All right, yeah, just go ahead.
Yep. So we've definitely seen that there's a big difference between the traditional way applications being created and modern web apps, which use a lot of features and a lot of things going on in the browser. That's key. So Zap is fairly effective with modern applications, but could be a lot better. And that's the same with a lot of web security tools. So not many of them actually handle modern web apps very well. That's something we definitely want to improve on. I think the whole integration between different types of security tools is absolutely key, and something as an industry we're particularly bad at. So I'm really hoping that we improve that. And I said we can get a lot of information from SaaS tools, which will help tools like Zap, and understanding exactly, you say there are problems with particular libraries. Okay, there's known vulnerability with this library, but is the application actually using any of that functionality? So there's a lot of integration between security tools that I'm hoping we'll be able to do better. Now, this is something that commercial companies can do more easily if they control the whole stack, but is more challenging for open source tools where we tend to focus on our individual areas. So it's something I'm hoping we're going to be able to improve in the open source world, and something we really need to do.
We hope that too as well. So, how does Zap compare to other open source web security tools such as Burp Suite or Nmap?
Well, Burp Suite is not open source. So that's Burp Suite is closed source and commercial. Nmap is open source, but it's focused on something very different. It's not focused on web applications. So I actually maintain a list of, and I may have gone offline again, but I'll carry on just in case. So I maintain a list of open source web applications, and that is available. I'll see if I can share the URL with Barsha later, but on my PSIINON GitHub account, and I track all of the most commonly used, all the web application scanners. Back again.
Awesome, awesome. Hey, did I lose you there? Can you
Uh,
still hear me?
I seem to lose you there.
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Hello, Simon.
Yeah, I can hear you. You're frozen for me, but I can hear you.
We again lost Simon. Uh, it's a little.
I'm back.
Zap project. And keep your questions down in the comments so that Simon can answer that for you, or I can make the questions reach out to Simon so that he can answer. So if you're still interested to contributing to an open source web security tool, also OWASP ZAP is the name of the project. And Simon, do I have you back?
I can hear you. Yep, I can. Oh no. I'm back again.
Hi, Simon.
Oh yeah,
We constantly have been experiencing thin connection issue.
yeah,
Yeah.
yep, I'm here.
Hi.
Oh yeah, back again.
Yep. I would just want you to kindly answer us this, like, what is the roadmap for the future development of OWASP app, and what new features can user expect to see in the upcoming releases?
So the roadmap depends on who gets involved. So we've been doing a lot of networking changes. So we've got support for HTTP2, which is absolutely key. So very pleased about that. One of the things I've been focusing on is authentication. So we know, well, Zap should be able to cope with anything, but you have to explain exactly how authentication works to Zap. So what I'm working on is trying to make sure that Zap can kind of configure itself and handle much more authentication out of the box. And that will make it much easier for automated scanning. So that's an absolutely key thing. But we do have other projects on the go for helping Zap understand modern web applications much better. And we're taking part in Google Summer of Code again this year. So we've got a set of projects. We don't know which ones of those will be selected, but we're certainly hoping we'll get some one or two students working on those. So yeah, definitely authentication, making one where it's better, maybe some more networking changes. Those are some of the key things, but it depends who gets involved. If other people come on board, want to work on things, then things, those kind of things may happen very quickly.
I just wish so that the project gets accepted into GSOC this year, and the community gets a lot far with the contributions all the students are bringing. So we wouldn't stretch this stream a little longer, but we would just want to conclude with two more questions here.
Sure.
And definitely, we will be expecting Simon back again on the show, discussing various different other things as well, because this is not the beginning and the end. This is just like the start of the show. And OWASP ZAP, maybe in the coming future, they have different releases, more features, even more projects that will probably stand out as independent entities. I believe so. So, how can individuals and organizations contribute to the ZAP project, and what skills and knowledge do you think that they require to do so effectively?
I, I mean, really, we see Zap as something a really great tool for learning. So if you can actually contribute very effectively and learn at the same time. If you have some development skills, that's really great. If you have some security knowledge, that's good. But you don't need both of those, and you can be relatively new in a lot of those things. So we do have on zadaproxy.org, we've got a contribution guide. It's pretty thorough. There's a lot of pages on there, and that ranges from just liking the repositories, that helps, helping with documentation, helping with the code, helping test Zap. There's a million things out there, too many for me to mention. So we've documented it a lot. So have a look at the Zap contributing guide, but also get in touch. If you want to get involved, then get in touch with me as well, and I can talk you through different possibilities.
Awesome. Listeners, please be mindful of what Simon just said and take the opportunity and make the best out of it. So, how do you see that the web application security landscape evolving in the next few years, and how is ZAP adapting to those changes?
And I mentioned already that modern web apps, there's a lot of new features out there in browsers, and applications are kind of making the most of that. In some ways, we wait to see what happens and then work out how to deal with it. So I'm not in the business of predicting what will happen. There's still so many things we've got to do. I'll focus on making ZAP as good as possible for how things work now, and as things change, we all do our best to make sure that ZAP is as effective as possible going forward.
We again would want it to pan out in the best possible way and take the security landscape to a much more inclusive area for students to come and contribute, and not just students, people beginning in the world of open source and in the world of security. So I would like to conclude by asking you this question: what advice would you give to developers or organizations that are just getting started with web application security and they are using the OWASP ZAP?
If you're getting started with web app security, then ZAP is the best place to start, because ZAP is kind of your attacker's view. This is what the people outside, the attackers, will be able to do the kind of things that ZAP can do. So you might not know what vulnerabilities out there, but the attackers will be able to find them very quickly. You should also look at things like security composition analysis. So look at your dependencies and make sure you keep those up to date. You will want to introduce static source code analysis, but that's easier on new projects, and on existing projects it's a lot of you can find a lot of vulnerabilities which may or may not be real. But start with ZAP and see what it can find, and make sure you can actually use ZAP effectively. And that means that make sure that ZAP explores your application effectively. Either configure it to handle authentication, or work out a way to make your authentication easier to handle and get ZAP to handle it that way. Make sure you're doing authenticated scans. That is a really great start.
Yeah, Simon, do I still have you with me, or did I
Yes,
lose you once again?
it looked like you lost me once again, but oh, and again. I'm back.
Thank God you're back. I again lost you for the last question. Yes, so I was asking, what advice would you be giving to developers and people who are starting out in the world of WebSec?
Yep, definitely. I mean, use ZAP to start with, because this is the attacker's view on application. The attackers will be able to find these vulnerabilities using ZAP or those same techniques. So use ZAP to start with. Definitely look at dependencies and make sure dependencies are up to date and you're not using libraries with known vulnerabilities. Then look at things like static source code analysis, and that might report a lot of things, but you can prioritize those. But start with a tool like ZAP, and go from there. Just take things one step at a time and make sure that ZAP is actually scanning your applications effectively, that you've configured it to handle authentication if you need to. And then once you're sure you're getting, ZAP is effective and finding things, fix those things and start looking at the other aspects of application security.
Right. So thank you, Simon, for coming on this particular show and sharing this
Pleasure.
absolutely insightful answers on web security, on Zap, and everything else. I have had like bunch of questions which I could have answered you, but in an hour, this is what I could make out of. So I'll also be sending you like a list of questions, and I
Sure.
shall be expecting you that if in your convenient time you can answer them
Of course.
a
Yeah.
little bit in writing, of course, because of all the questions, so that I can make it part of a blog post which students can refer to if they are starting out with Zap. I hope you'll be doing so. So
Of
thank
course.
you for coming, Simon. Any concluding thoughts, which is a little unrelated to Zap and the entire purpose of this particular show? How did you feel coming through, and what was just your feeling like? Share
Well,
with us.
yeah, I mean, it's great. I love these kind of things. I think it's really good you're doing this kind of show to help people get involved in open source and teach people. So thank you for doing this. And yeah, look forward to seeing you again sometime soon.
Absolutely, absolutely, Simon. Thank you for having us. We'll be ending the broadcast soon. And if you have any more questions, once again, please drop it in the comments so that it reaches Simon in some way, or I'll make it reach out to him if that is necessary. And once again, Zap is has been portrayed in GSOC this year. So if you're interested in Zap's projects, want to get involved, so just get started with it. Like take this opportunity and make the most out of it. And since Google is also supporting most of the open source projects, there is a high opportunity for you to not only get involved with GSOC, but mostly in the world of web security. As Simon mentioned in some of his answers, that security is not an intuitive thing. It is something that you probably need to think it through, observe, and then get inside. So yes, I think that's about it. Thank you, Simon.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for coming, and we look forward to having you once again. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.